Start video. Is that where?
Start live now. We're live. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to take a little bit of time and talk about some missionary suggestions related to coronavirus. In fact, I'm going to add this. Typically, I have been doing these Facebook Lives with my favorite colleague, Jana Jenkins, sitting next to me. And it's just me and my dog Bailey next to me right now. And my loud neighbors. I hope you don't overhear too much of what's going on next door. I think they're playing video games and having lots of fun, but they're a bit loud. I think, well, I'll just kind of hop into this. I blogged about this a couple days ago and have been getting a fair amount of traction. I've seen my blog get shared about 8 times. I've seen some thoughts I've given on Facebook, some long posts get shared a multiple of times. And then I think, like most of you, I live in several places in the world in my own mind. Like I once lived in East Africa, and then I once lived in Chicago, and I did my education in Abilene, Texas, and I now live in North Dakota. And my network is really, I've got people who will be watching me in Australia, in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, and scattered throughout North America. And I've been watching my network discuss coronavirus. And some broad sweeps that I'm going to talk about is I am noticing there's a lot of really good thinking out there. There's a lot of really good information out there. I have tried to, when I see something that's good, I have tried to, some of it I put on Facebook, a portion, everything that I think is good, I tweet, try to keep drawing attention to it. And there's a lot of really good information out there. But yet there's also some really bad information out there that I'm seeing going around. And one of the little glitches that I'm seeing is that generally, I think if you're looking, and you don't have to look real hard, you can find fairly good medical information, and you can find some wisdom about how a local church should be dealing with this, or some nonprofit, or something that we're kind of dealing with where we're going to typically have a social interaction of people. But I am not seeing a tremendous amount of information that's really saying, okay, based upon what Christians have done through thousands of years, and this really is not new, Christians throughout thousands of years have dealt with, whether it's violent persecution or epidemics, we as followers of Christ have landed so many times where there's been a significant crisis in our community, and then we've kind of dealt with it. And what do we come with some common themes throughout history and how we deal with that? And I'm seeing some of that, but not as much. And then even I'm going to add that I have been noticing I'm on a multiple of WhatsApp groups that are basically certain communities of diaspora people that I know. For instance, I'm on some with Ugandans in the Rocky Mountain region, and some with Ugandans that are in Chicago, and some with people from Sudan in Chicago, and some with people from Rwanda who are in North Dakota or are in South Bend, Indiana. And I'm watching on our WhatsApp groups sometimes some really good stuff and then sometimes some really bad stuff. And I just thought, well, I want to try to address it with what things I would bring as a missionary. I wrote this out on his blog, and I've basically got 4 major points. And I'm going to walk you through it, and then hopefully we'll be wiser as a community. And if you see something that is a hole in my thinking, please throw it in after this is over. Let's keep the dialogue going. We make one another smarter. The Holy Spirit speaks through all of us. We can learn together. First thing I would say, don't fear. There is this fear-mongering that's just infecting the world. And we have to remember some very basic truths about our faith. One, God is sovereign. He knows everything. He has all power. He's guiding history. He guided history to such a point that he sent his son to die for our sins. And if we put our faith in him, no matter what happens in this world, we as God's people, our spirits and souls endure forever. Now, frankly, we probably will know some people who may not live through this pandemic, but yet we remember death is not the final matter. And for the majority of us, the vast, vast majority, we're going to live through it and we're going to be wiser, and we're going to be better people. And when it's all done, we're going to be able to speak in such a way where God gets the glory. First thing, don't fear. Second, I want to encourage you to steward your health, your wealth, in your home. I hope you've got good habits, good disciplines in your life, but as crises happen, a pandemic is an example, you will typically notice that those who are the most helpful are the ones that have stewarded their life well. They've had certain disciplines. And you're going to have to turn to some people who have strong spirits, strong bodies, a little bit of resources, and a hospitable home to get you through this. So this is just basic living. Get a good night's sleep, eat well, get some daily exercise. You do that, the odds of you getting through this and being healthy are better. Live on a budget, have a little bit of money saved up. Manage your house so that there's a couple extra beds in it. And have a little bit set aside in your home so somebody can stop by and you can feed people for a few days and you're not going to be depleted. Steward your health, wealth, and home. Conversely to this, and I'm going to make fun of one of my neighbors. This morning as I was walking my dog, I looked at one of the cars in my neighborhood, and one of my neighbors had their car completely full of toilet paper. They have been hoarding, and it would appear to me they have so much stuff in their house they can't fit it all in the house, so now they're using their car as storage. And I had a dark thought, and I decided I wouldn't take a photo and give the location where you could loot a car, but don't do that. Don't hoard, don't pillage. That's a response that's based upon fear, it's based upon coveting, and faith is very different. And frankly, if you're able to run to Walmart and buy thousands of rolls of toilet paper and a tremendous amount of supplies, you've got some financial resources that you've got saved up. I thank God that you've been able to do that. But there are a lot of people in this world who live paycheck to paycheck, and all they have money for is to get through that week. And if you deplete the resources that are in a local store, you're making life very hard on those who live paycheck by paycheck. Fourth, I'm going to encourage you to listen to good counsel. I mentioned I've been watching some bad counsel out there. That's not the majority, but there's good counsel. Specifically, I've tweeted out a few things. I put on Facebook. I've seen some good things that have been put out by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. I've seen some good things put out in Christian circles by Christianity Today, by the Gospel Coalition. I've seen some good stuff that's been put out by Mayo. And I'm going to encourage you, look for those things. Look for the stuff that's credible. Look for the stuff that has a long track record. Look for the things where people are speaking out of their expertise. Also, I want to encourage you to be looking at what's happening locally. Look for what is being said by your local county health department, your local state department, your national health organizations. And I'm going to add two little things here that I've been observing. Within the diaspora communities, our African diaspora communities, we have a lot of people in our community. It's higher than most immigrant communities. We have a lot of people who are skilled medical people. And turn to them. I hope I don't embarrass them, but I saw Dr. Timothy Santongo, Ugandan in Chicago, weigh into some of these matters, and he really helped our Ugandan community think better. I saw Alice Masumba, who works with the state health department in North Dakota, weigh in on some things. Make sure you know some experts that can weigh in, and when they speak, listen to them. Fifth thing, and this is a broad one, is to protect the vulnerable. Those of us that are God's people, His word over and over again speaks Old and New Testament about the responsibility of those of us who have been given some measures of strength or resources to care for the vulnerable. And one of the things that will happen in a crisis is some people are going to have less to deal with than others. I thought of 5 that I thought were pretty vulnerable. And the first one, it's going to talk about ethnic issues. I have noticed amongst my Asian friends that they are talking about things that are happening to them. Some have had people shout at them. They're living not in their ancestral home. Someone will shout, "Go back to where you came from." Some of them will sit and people will think, well, this is funny. They'll throw a joke out there that really is wounding. If you have Asian friends, I'm going to say that one of the first things to do is speak up for them. Treat them with extra measures of kindness and respect. And if you hear someone speak in a derogatory way to them, confront it. Second vulnerable group, elderly and chronically ill. I think I can say this clearly, not stepping in an area I don't know, but all the research I'm saying says if you are over 80, you're in a dangerous spot. If you're over 60, it's a little bit dicey. If you've got a chronic issue, coronavirus is something you need to pay attention to. But for most people who are young and have a certain measure of health, this is just going to be like getting a cold. So because we care about people who are old and chronically ill, all of us need to follow the instructions. We need to minimize physical contact, wash our hands, avoid unnecessary social gatherings, do the type of things that some will say is flatten the curve, slow this thing down. And remember, if I can avoid getting coronavirus, and eventually probably all of us are going to be exposed to it, but if I can slow it down, that means if an old person gets sick, they can get into the emergency room and the systems aren't overwhelmed. We want to protect old people by trying to slow down the infection rates. Well, let me get to my second page of notes. Third group that's vulnerable. My kids, my son Ethan is in Notre Dame. Notre Dame's closed. My daughter Ruth is at Judson University in Chicago. They've closed. Universities are starting to close down, and international students are particularly vulnerable because they are living here and home is across an ocean. If you know some international students in the university that they've been a part of has gotten closed down, pick up the phone and call and say, come by, we've got an extra room, we've got an extra bed. Weather this one out, we'll take care of you. I'm going to also say if you live in one of those cities that has an active campus ministry or a large university with an international program, it's time to pick up the phone and see what you can do. Fourth group that's vulnerable, students from low-income families. University students who come from a low-income family, their families typically are budgeting their housing and their food, assuming financial aid will pay for it, and they're saving money so when the university is over, they can go meet their student and bring them home, and all of a sudden, the budget is out of whack. Some students who are maybe in states where public schools are closing, the family's used to free or reduced lunches for breakfast and lunch, and all of a sudden you've got a family that's having a difficulty. If you know someone in that circumstance, a few little things. If you have resources, stop by their home with a bag of groceries, or write them a card and put a little cash in it. Or if you're somebody who can hire and you know a dad is a hard worker or a mom is a hard worker and could use 5-10 hours of extra work, give them a call. Treat people with dignity and help them out. Related to that is the working families where dad and mom both have to work and they use school as a way to do childcare. If you're a bit like Jan and I, we're old and we got a little bit of time. Say, call up a working family and say, why don't you have your kids stop by, or we'll come by and pick them up and they can spend 4 hours with us. We'll give you a break. Sixth major thing is discernment. I'm going to be a part of this conversation tomorrow. A lot of us are in new territory. I can look back in history and see where God's people have dealt with this type of stuff before, but for me, this is the first time I've ever going to be dealing with a pandemic. And I want to ask for God's people to be discerning, to pray, to listen, to find the appropriate discernment. And when we're discerning, that means sometimes we're going to push against things that are comfortable or things that our culture wants us to do. Being frank, I really like the church I'm a part of. I'm a part of 2 churches on a Sunday morning, Revive on Sunday morning, and then Adonai on Sunday afternoon. And it's the funnest thing of my week to be with these people. They're my best friends. And if we hit a point where we realize we have to close church down, I'm going to miss everybody. But there's got to be some points where you say, okay, I'm going to discern. And if you're a decision maker, think, okay, what's the thing that I need to do that's the best decision for my church people in my network? And sometimes that's going to mean I'm going to withdraw from things that I have had great joy in I'm going to shake less hands and give less hugs the next couple of days. Seventh thing, and this is going to sound like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth. I would say, okay, be cautious. Don't take too many hands. Don't hug people too often. My golden doodle is going to lick me in the face in just a few moments. Don't be a golden doodle. But if the worst predictions are right, that we're going to come into a season in history, and it's happening in places like Italy, when I listen to my friends in Italy speak, where there's going to be some people who are vulnerable, who are going to get sick, and they're going to be gravely ill. At the point that we have people we know who are gravely ill, those of us who have stewarded our health well, we need to step into this. Frankly, no one should be gravely ill alone. No one should be left by themselves. Somebody needs to go and sit with them. If you are a church pastor, a church shepherd, a church elder, frankly, I think the Bible calls you to go sit with those people and care for them and minister the Lord's mercy. If you're a minister, if you're a deacon, you need to get with them. And I would hope that you've stewarded your life well enough, that you're physically strong enough that you could move somebody from their bed to the bathroom. You're physically strong enough if you need to move them from their home to a car, to a hospital, you can do that. We're going to have to hop in and do the type of things that Christians have done in the darkest parts of human history and epidemics. Last thing I'm going to suggest is we need to create new and appropriate ministry paradigms. I'm very thankful. I have lived my whole life in countries that have generally been very Christian friendly, where the infrastructure and the cultures and the rhythms and the expectations have been Christian friendly, where we would have buildings where we could meet, and we could put somewhere between 50 and a couple hundred people in most buildings I was a part of. And few, we could fit 1,000 in, and we could have broadcast our services, and we could do all these things, but it was all based on some presuppositions about how many people could gather and stay healthy and stay safe. And we are entering into a season, I am generally seeing the recommendations coming out of avoid crowds of over 100. I'm seeing some recommendations saying avoid crowds of over 50. And with that reality, if you're going to a church that is in the several hundred to several thousand range, odds are you're going to have to cancel church services and do something new. It's now time to put on our creativity hats. And I think particularly we're going to have to look at how do we well use social media, well use the internet, how well use our church websites. And I have said this in the past, one of the best missionary books I've read, and it was years ago, but it's a classic, Missionary Methods, St. Paul's or Ours, by a man named Roland Allen. He's asked the question, what would Paul do in a situation like this? Here's what I think Paul would do. I think he'd be listening well to government leaders and his ministry colleagues. I think he'd be bathing everything in prayer. I think he'd thank God for everything that's gone right in the past, from church infrastructure and all the things, but I think he'd stay really flexible. I think he'd model. He would not ask anyone to do something that he wasn't already doing, and then he'd instruct and teach and empower. I think he'd expect elders to get in people's homes. I think he'd expect deacons to minister with grace and service. I think he would very assertively use social media. You'd see him on a couple times a day on Facebook. He'd be tweeting. He'd be on Instagram. He'd have YouTube channels. And he'd be trying to make an intimate, personal connection every day with people he cared about. And he'd have a consistent message of what it means to live in Christ. Thank you for giving me 20 minutes of your time. I hope this was helpful. Our prayers are with all of our friends and family around the world as you wrestle with these matters. God's blessings on you. Mungu akubariki. Mukama abere namwe. Imani ikurunde. This is Mzee signing off. Bye-bye.